Well, good day, folks. Everything new under the sun. I've had a great Christmas with family, and I hope you did too. And Happy New Year to everybody. And I probably will be doing kind of a New Year's video about what we would expect next. But I thought it was very interesting what Trump said about the 51st state. We're going to talk about that. This is the keynote presentation that I created, the timeline of the return of the Lord. And one of the things was that war was going to happen in 2024. And I think it's been happening all over the world, in fact, and it continues. And it continues to rumble along in Ukraine. And of course, there was war in Israel all year long. So it was a year of war, and I think that's going to escalate. Now, the other thing is that the 7 year tribulation obviously didn't start in 2024. I've always suggested that I would move this along. If we weren't there yet, this is complete speculation. The Bible doesn't say when the 7 year tribulation starts, or at least we haven't kind of decrypted that from the Bible, from the scriptural text yet. But the Bible does give signs. But time moves slowly when you're living through it. If you're living outside of time, it's moving very quickly. If you look at things that happened in biblical times, for example, all those things happened within the span of a couple chapters, right? Any narrative, any storyline you want to look at in the Bible seems to have happened over a very short period of time. Meanwhile, it's happened over a generation or more, or generations. And so things seem to be going slowly from our point of view. I still believe that 2028 is significant, and it could be that 2028 is the start of the 7 year period. 2028 marks 2,000 years from the death of Jesus Christ. And so I think it's a significant time marker because you look at the 6 days of creation, and on the seventh day, the Lord rested. Likewise, a day to the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. That's from Psalm 90, I believe it is. And so you're looking at that, and you're looking at about 6,000 years of the history of man. And we are very near that complete 6,000 years. No, the year 2000 was not 6,000 years. That was less than 6,000 years. I think the milestone, the marker of the last 2 days was the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. And he died around the year 28 at the age of 30, somewhere around the age 30 there. He was born prior to the start of the Gregorian calendar. He was born 2, 3, 4, 5 years prior to the start of the Gregorian calendar, just over 2,000 or about 2,000 years ago. And so we reckon our calendars by that, but they are off. So this 2028 year, again, it's an interesting year. It's the end of 80 years of Israel being a nation. It became a nation in 1948, and they turned 70 years in 2018, and they will turn 80 years old in 2028. And why is that significant? Well, Bible says that man is afforded 70 years, which is 70 years. A score is 20. 70 years. But by reason of strength through the Lord, if the Lord sustains them, 80 years. And that's kind of the general timeline that we're afforded in this day and age as human beings. So you relate that to a nation as well, and Israel is going to be turning 80. They're, by reason of strength, God is protecting them, with upholding them, and so they're they get near 80, and their time runs out at that time. So I think that's a significant timeline again. The year 2028, 80 years since the birth of the nation of Israel in one day, which the Bible also reveals that, it says, can a nation be born in one day? Speaking of the Jewish nation, and indeed it was in 1948. So 2028 is a pivotal year. Does that kick off the first 3.5 years? Does that kick off the 7 year period? I don't know, but we're obviously not there. How do I know that? Well, because the Antichrist isn't in power yet. We don't know who he is. There's not a peace deal. I think we get to the precipice of World War III before the Antichrist kind of appears on the scene and says, you know what, I can create peace. I think we get to economic collapse and civil unrest and near total annihilation by maybe nuclear weapons or otherwise before an Antichrist figure comes and he saves everybody. He appears to the world as a Messiah because he brings them out of famine, warfare, economic collapse. And that's why everybody subscribes to him and joins, even though they have to accept the mark of the beast, even though they have to accept him as Messiah. They still take that because most people, if they're hungry, they will say whatever they need to say to get food. They're desperate, right? So the Antichrist has to come at a time when people are desperate. So, are we heading towards absolute chaos in World War III? We absolutely are. So I think everybody can see that happening. We're moving towards world government, and that's what I want to talk about. Bible speaks in the last days about a fewer number of nations, a 10-nation confederacy, and a fewer number of nations that the world government presides over. And what is interesting is that countries are starting to talk about coming together, removing some national sovereignty in the name of health and safety of its citizens and protection and economic cooperation. And Trump said some interesting things. So let's take a look at that. This is Donald Trump in I think it's Truth Social. Well, this is on Twitter, X. He says, no one can answer why we subsidize Canada to the tune of $100 million a year. It makes no sense. Many Canadians want to become the 51st state. They would save massively on taxes and military protection. I think it's a great idea. 51st state. So he's upsetting a lot of people who don't recognize that most of what he says is bluster anyways. I don't understand why they don't get that. But it says U.S. President Donald Trump is taking aim at Canada, saying it would be a great idea to make it America's 51st state. Again, he says that many Canadians want to become the 51st state. And so people are up in arms about that. This is Twitter, X, and Patriot Kyle. This is how Canada would look as the 51st state of. Let me see. Come up here. As a 51st state. So, joining populations, joining the GDP, etc., and taking a look at it. So it's interesting. And to be honest, me as a Canadian definitely gave that a second thought for maybe the freedoms afforded and the lower taxes, that's for sure. Other more socialist type friends, would not like that idea, and they like where Canada is going. I, for one, don't. I don't like that it's going, that the government continues to add laws and restrictions on us. Yes, it makes us more free. It makes us more free by removing our freedoms, if that makes any sense. But this is an RT article. This is interesting, and it speaks to the state of the world and the prophecy speaking about, the fewer nations and the global government and the world economic system that the Antichrist presides over at the time of the end, where political borders are being removed, sovereignty is being removed. There will be a one world currency, and that means there will be no sovereign currencies anymore. All nations will somehow, for some reason, accept a global currency and accept a one world government. I don't know if any nations are left out of that. If they are, they're probably starving and on their own. Says the king is dead. Trump's talk on taking Canada highlights the demise of this critical political concept. What political concept is that? Well, the political concept of sovereign nation states. So isn't it interesting, coming from a Russian propaganda website, talking about what Trump has been saying about Canada, and the idea that we need to rethink sovereign borders and political borders. It says here, Donald Trump's most notable contribution to world politics since his re-election as U.S. president has been stirring the pot with audacious comments, annexing Canada, buying Greenland, reclaiming Panama Canal. These remarks have sparked retaliatory statements from governments a flurry of internet humor, and even some thoughtful analysis, it says. While most observers dismiss these musings as an attempt to emotionally destabilize negotiating partners, and yes, it is complete bluster. At the end of the day, Trump wants to make a deal. There's a deeper layer worth exploring. Is it? Is it worth exploring? Is this the propaganda they're pushing on people, making people say, huh, maybe this would work out? Trump's provocations might just be making a larger point. State sovereignty is no longer the unshakable concept we once believed it to be. Remember, this is a Russian propaganda news outlet suggesting that state sovereignty is no longer unshakable as a concept. In a world where power increasingly relies on military might, sovereignty has shifted from being a formal status to a practical question of control. Think of it from the lens of Bible prophecy, one world government, an Antichrist figure, and one world currency, a mark of the beast system, where no man that across the earth can buy or sell save he that has the mark. And you can see where this is, speaking prophetically about, and the Bible spoke of it long before, about the confederacy of nations, the idea of a one world government. This is setting the stage, really. And now we're seeing political leaders start talking about tearing down borders, right? So it's a practical question of control as we move along in these dangerous days. Nations are grouping together, creating alliances so they can be stronger economically, militarily, so they can battle other nations. And as we head to economic collapse, this will be more of a story, because we will need to build up our militaries and build up our protection, because there will be other countries coming looking to take what we have when we're down. What is Ezekiel 38? Well, Ezekiel 38 is a nation or nations from the north, Gog and Magog, coming into the land of Israel and taking a spoil, taking gold and silver and cattle and food, all the good things. Why are they doing that? Don't they have their own? Well, no, because Ezekiel 38 and 39 comes at a time of economic collapse. I said this before, and probably at a time of when we've just went through maybe some sort of initial stages of nuclear war, nuclear fallout, where maybe there are fewer places where you can eat food that's not irradiated and contaminated by radiation. And so they're coming into Israel, which seems to be a protected nation. By the way, it is. God is protecting it supernaturally. To steal what Israel has in those last days, as the rest of the world is just coming out of potentially a World War III of sorts, where maybe some nuclear weapons have flown. And so it tells you that nations will be banding together, or may just be purely destroyed at that point in time. And by the way, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the young lions of Tarshish don't come to save or back up Israel militarily during that invasion of the countries from the north. Why is that? Who are the young lions of Tarshish? Well, Canada, Australia. It's the nations that came out of the United Kingdom, Britain. United States is one of them, although not part of the Commonwealth. They came out of the UK ultimately and disconnected from the monarchy, of course. And we know that the U.S. is the staunchest supporter of Israel at this point in time. But during that period, they're just saying a bunch of things. They're saying, why have you come to take a spoil to the invading nations and leader? But they're not coming to the military aid of Israel at that time. And that's for God's purposes, because God's going to show his power through that. But it shows to you that the United States at that point in time and other nations probably are going to be mostly destroyed, have no power, maybe in the midst of civil war, economic collapse, and we won't have the ability, the political ability, military might to project power over in the Middle East. We won't be able to, because we'll be going through the Second Great Depression, the greatest depression of all, and there will be no people, no money, no political will to back them up. So it says, today, imagining Canada, Greenland, or Mexico as part of the United States seems absurd. But in the near future, it says, we might find ourselves seriously questioning why states, unable to secure their own sovereignty, should retain it at all. So, if Canada doesn't have a big enough military to protect its own sovereignty from the U.S., from Russia, Why wouldn't other nations come and take it over? Well, we think in this civilized world, we're civilized, this is the modern age, that won't happen. But indeed, it's been happening throughout the last 6,000 years of the history of man. Nations take over nations, sometimes for fun because kings want to, other times out of necessity when there's economic collapse, Great Depressions. Sometimes nations have to go into other nations and take them because they're desperate. And I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying that's what nations do. That's what groups of humans do and kingdoms do. They go over and they either buy up other nations, buy the land because the one nation is starving and they need money, so they sell a bunch, or they take it over militarily, right? By force, or maybe it's just consumed because the other nation just falls flat on its face militarily. Canada certainly doesn't have the military, the funding, the bandwidth to secure its borders from the Russians or anybody. And we rely on the United States a lot for that. So, it would be a very practical question. Why wouldn't we be the 51st state? And it's a very true thing when you're looking at practically, and from the point of view of military power, and how we can defend our own borders. We can't. The United States could run us over right away, and so yes, it's a question that's coming up. And as we move in Bible prophecy to the timeline of the return of the Lord, where there is a world government, you're going to see more and more nations grouping together, removing, the idea of a border, going into political, economic partnerships and cooperation, to a point where, just kind of like the European Union, you have a group of nations that are not really sovereign nations anymore. They're just all working under the banner and under the leadership of either an elected or unelected group of advisors or political figures, like the European Union is right now. And you quickly see that in end-time Bible prophecy, the Antichrist will be managing and be leading a smaller set of nations. So we're headed there. The Bible prophecy is accurate. The Bible is true every time. We just haven't waited long enough to see it come to fruition, and we see it now happening in North America, which is an astounding thing to see, to be honest. So we're going to talk about the timeline of the return of the Lord in the near future. I'll shift my projections ahead, where we see it. I think war in 2025 is also the case. There's going to be birth pains. There's going to be peaks and valleys. There's going to be times of intense warfare, and there's going to be times of a respite, pause. I think the pandemic was one of those birth pains where there was a great spike in trouble and trials, and then there was a pause, and then there's another spike in trials and troubles in Ukraine, and that's for the most part still going. And then there may be a pause, and then there'll be a new thing, whether it be bird flu or some other global pandemic or global issue that's going on, and we'll probably get locked down again. All these things I could absolutely see coming in 2025. They tried it once and it worked, and they're gonna do it again as governments secure more and more control over the citizens. Now we have these nations where people are voting in populist leaders. Donald Trump in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, and what's his name, Millie, over in is it Argentina? Anyways, over there. But I don't think that lasts. Maybe it does. Maybe those nations that have voted in the conservative leaders, maybe they just are economically weak and destroyed because of all the debt laden upon them, and the leaders can't do anything about it. So they're not a part of the narrative of end-time Bible prophecy, and they're just kind of sitting on the sidelines watching. By the way, that sounds like Ezekiel 38-39, young lions of Tarshish sitting on the sidelines watching. And maybe they're not under direct control of the Antichrist, which is a speculation. But they have no power to do anything. So they're just sitting on the sidelines. They're in poverty. They're just trying to get by. Maybe there's civil unrest, that sort of thing. But they're not doing anything major. They're not policing the world. The United States certainly isn't. And the United States apparently in that time doesn't have any power, nor does Canada. Australia, other young lives of Tarshish during that period, right? So it shows to me that a significant World War III of sorts occurs, economic collapse happens, and we move to a new world economic system. This is where the Antichrist comes in, and he moves us in that direction. Once the world is on its knees, once we're all desperate, once we've lost our shirts, our hats, our houses, once we've lost everything and we're desperate, then the world will accept anything. What did they do during COVID? They accepted anything the government was saying because people were scared, because they were scared of that. The mainstream media made them scared, terrified, in fact, that they would die if they stepped out the door. And what do? They stayed indoors. They did whatever the government said. This is what's going to happen in the last days, folks. It's no different. People are no different. People are humans, and ultimately, they would rather be safe and lose all their freedoms than not be safe and preserve their freedoms. Same way with gun safety in Canada. They're taking away a lot of the firearms that we're allowed to have. And that's because the government is making us more safe, but also removing freedoms. And most people are happy to get rid of their freedoms just because they don't particularly use firearms, whatever the case may be. They don't think it affects them. But ultimately, there will come a point when the government does come in and control their lives to the point where they don't like it. But at that point, they won't be able to do anything because we've been voting for socialist and near communist governments all the way along anyway. So it'll be too far gone by then. This is what people don't see. They don't see further down the road towards where the government is going, totalitarian, complete control government, where yes, you may be safe, but you can't do anything. You have no permission, no rights to do anything because the government has locked you down in the name of your own health and safety. So thanks for watching. I'll leave it there, guys. Happy New Year to everybody. And I'll try and get this updated. We'll talk about it, and we'll talk about what's going to happen in 2025.